Hi, my name's Jack Boffrey and I study exercise, nutrition and health, and today we'll be looking at whether endurance training is affected by a low carbohydrate diet. I'll be looking at a few papers to see whether it does or it doesn't affect endurance training.
No.
So the aim of endurance training is to increase the aerobic capacity of your body. No. So the theory behind a high fat diet while endurance training is that it increases your body's ability to use fat as a fuel source during exercise, so there'll be increased fat oxidation and reduced carbohydrate oxidation, which will prolong exercise.
A key study by Volek et al. 2015 looked at the metabolic characteristics of keto-adapted ultra-endurance runners. The athletes performed a maximal graded exercise test and a 180 minutes submaximal run at 64% VO2 max on a treadmill to determine metabolic responses. One group habitually consumed a traditional high carbohydrate diet and the other a low carbohydrate diet for an average of 20 months. So this is a graph from the Volek paper, and it's looking at fat oxidation rate during 180 minutes of running at 64% VO2 max and 120 minutes of recovery. So on the x-axis we've got running time, and on the y-axis we've got fat oxidation, and it's looking at the high carbohydrate diet compared to the low carbohydrate diet. And all time points were significantly different between the groups. So with a high carb diet, there was significantly increased fat oxidation rate during exercise compared to the low carbohydrate diet. This is the same graph as before, however this is looking at carbohydrate oxidation rather than fat oxidation. As you can see from the graph of the high carbohydrate diet, carbohydrate oxidation was significantly higher at all time points during exercise compared to the low carbohydrate diet.
So the results of this paper show that long-term ketogenic diet increases fat oxidation compared to a long-term high carbohydrate diet in ultra-endurance marathoners and Ironman triathletes. However, this study didn't test performance, it only measured the oxidation rates, so it is unknown whether a ketogenic diet will increase performance.
Another study by Lambert et al. 1994 looked at endurance in trained cyclists during moderate intensity exercise following 2 weeks adaptation to a high-fat diet. This study took 5 endurance trained male cyclists in a randomised crossover design where they did 2 weeks of either a high-fat or a high carbohydrate diet, then they did 2 weeks of their normal diet, and then they did another 2 weeks of, again, either a high-fat or a high carbohydrate diet. The consecutive periods of exercise that they tested include a Wingate test of muscle power, cycle to exhaustion of 85% and 50% of peak power output. They measured the metabolite concentrations, and substrate oxidation was also measured. This table shows the different measurements during cycling exercise at 85% peak power output. So it compares the high fat to the high carbohydrate diet. So the time to exhaustion is the one to focus on here. So the time to exhaustion for the high fat diet was 8.3 minutes compared to the high carbohydrate diet, which was 12.5 minutes. So this suggests that a high carbohydrate diet is beneficial at exercise at higher intensities compared to a high fat diet. The main finding of this study was that the time to exhaustion for the high carbohydrate diet was significantly lower compared to the high fat diet at 50% of peak power. This shows that a high fat diet could potentially be advantageous at a lower exercise intensity.
So unlike the Volek paper, Lambert looked at performance and substrate oxidation. So they found that there's a high rate of fat oxidation with a low carbohydrate diet, and also at 50% peak power output, the high fat diet was significantly better than the high carbohydrate diet. However, at 85% peak power output, the high carbohydrate diet was more beneficial. A drawback of this study is that there was only 5 participants in the study, which is a very small sample size. So further research could maybe look at a larger portion of athletes. This will increase the reliability of the data.
Vinny et al. 1983 looked at the preservation of submaximal exercise capability with reduced carbohydrate oxidation. This study took 5 well-trained cyclists and fed them a eucaloric balanced diet for 1 week, followed by a eucaloric ketogenic diet for 3 weeks after that. Their VO2 max was tested at the end of each diet. They did an exercise to exhaustion test at 62 to 64% of VO2 max after each diet. They measured oxidation and metabolites during this process. Here is a schematic showing the order of events during the 38 days of the experiment. This table shows the glycogen levels for the balanced diet and the ketogenic diet pre and post exercise, and as you can clearly see that pre-exercise the ketogenic diet had significantly lower glycogen levels compared to the balanced diet.
Vinny et al. Found that there was no significant difference between a eucaloric balanced diet and a eucaloric ketogenic diet on continuous exercise to exhaustion at 62 to 64% of VO2 max. However, 2 of the 5 participants cycled for longer on the ketogenic diet, suggesting that it could be different for individuals and individuals react differently to each diet. In this video I have looked at 3 different papers, all looking into this area to help you decide whether it is a good idea or a bad idea to have a low carbohydrate diet while endurance training. 3 studies tell us. So firstly, it's clear that a ketogenic diet increases fat oxidation during endurance training and exercise. Secondly, these studies show that a ketogenic diet is potentially better at a lower to moderate intensity of exercise. However, higher intensity exercise, sort of 85% of VO2 max, a high carbohydrate diet seems more beneficial. Also, 2 of these studies only had 5 participants, which is quite a small sample size. So future researchers try and look at recruiting more participants in these studies to get a better idea of whether a ketogenic diet is beneficial. However, these studies look at high-level cyclists and elite endurance marathoners and triathletes, so this can't really be related to the everyday sort of sports person. So again, future research should look at other sort of parts of the population other than elite sports people. And finally, these studies show mixed results into whether a ketogenic diet improves endurance performance. This, however, could be down to different individuals responding differently to a ketogenic diet. So overall, it has been shown that a ketogenic diet does not impair endurance performance.